Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It is 4:30. Before we begin our meeting, I'd like to start with a moment of silence, stand for a moment of silence, and then join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, if we could have a roll call, please.
Brad Hannon.
Here.
Tom Eggers.
Here.
Sean Brewster.
Here.
Wayne Barahona.
Here.
Keith Hamill.
Here.
All right. You have before you the agenda. It's a rather long one, so I'd like to keep it moving along. Take a motion to approve this, please.
Motion. Support.
Roll call, please.
Eggers.
Aye.
Brewster.
Aye.
Barahona.
Aye.
Hamill.
Aye.
Hint.
Aye.
All right. And then at this time, I'd like to step down with the three newly re-elected council members till we can take the oath of office. Please join me down here. All right. If we're ever going to do this, we just all stand on this side. We're going to let you each state your individual name, I, Wayne Barahona, so on and so forth. Collectively, we'll take the rest of the oath said.
Okay.
All right. So I, Wayne Barahona.
I, Wayne Barahona. I, Pete Hamill. I, Brad Hint.
Do solemnly swear
That
I will uphold all the laws of the Constitution of the United States,
That I will uphold all of the laws of the Constitution of the United States,
State of Iowa, City of Sheldon.
State of Iowa, and the City of Sheldon.
I will faithfully and impartially,
I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge all duties of the office of City Council Member
discharge all of the duties of the office of City Council
for the City of Sheldon, Iowa,
for the City of Sheldon, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law. Amen.
Come on. Oh, that's Pete. Should have, like the president, give him for each line in your name.
At least get a pen to take home. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, at this time, it's time for public comments. If you have a comment you would like to make that does not relate to anything else on the agenda, now is your time. Seeing no motion, no motion down there, let's move forward then on to our consent agenda. You have it before you there. Take a motion to approve that, please.
So moved. Support.
Discussion, anyone? Questions? Roll call, please.
Brewster.
Aye.
Barahona.
Aye.
Hamill.
Aye.
Hint.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
All right. Moving on then to old business. Preston, you're with us once again. Welcome back. The podium is yours.
Well, I trust that you all had a happy Thanksgiving. The weather wasn't cooperative, but I think we all got together. First thing I wanted to do is I wanted to acknowledge that I had sent a letter to the City Council. I think that was reflected both in the newspaper. It's a difficult situation, but I also wanted to express that in person, that I kind of lost sight of my intention and overlooked some of the more obvious things that the council has accomplished. One of the things I wanted to add to that was, I don't think it was mentioned either in the paper or in my letter, but all of the items that we've come to realize here in the last few months, the expanding the health insurance options to include the HSA, the freezing of the health insurance contribution rates at their current levels, and increasing the life insurance benefit, all of those were initiated by the council. I was contacted by Sam somewhere after that the council had begun debating those issues, and I was happy to participate. That's rare in my business that a council, that a city will step up and try to make those changes independent of any prompting from us. So I thank you again, and I know that the employees were also very appreciative of that. I'm glad that I am batting fourth in the lineup instead of further down the lineup. And I appreciate you have a full agenda, so I'll make this brief. We're down to the issue of the merger, and I went through and I read the bulk of the meeting report or the preparation report in Sam's packet. I think he's covered pretty much all the items. Since I was last here, we have found out that the city of LaPorte City, which is over by Blackhawk County, the city of Centerville, and Sergeant Bluff, just as last Tuesday, have all signed stipulations and to merge public safety groups with non-public safety groups. So that door is now open for us to walk through if we so choose to do that. Don't really have any other things. I've got some statistics here from the meeting that we had in Sergeant Bluff last Tuesday. I took the opportunity to bring you an excerpt of their meeting minutes. One of the things that I would point out is that things are done differently in all the cities, all the counties.
Can't hear you.
If you just save your comments from the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Marv. Different communities, whether it's a county or a city or a school, all do things a little differently. The city of Sergeant Bluff, the bargaining team for the city will include their attorney, who has been an Allers and Cooney attorney for many years, the mayor, at least 2 city council members, and usually the department heads for that particular group. That's probably the most common configuration of a bargaining group. That lends to an advantage where essentially we get to know each other, and there's a lot of open conversation back and forth across the table where we get to share ideas and do it in a much more informal way than just passing proposals across. The history that I have had here, I can't speak to before my time, which basically was myself and Tom Worley, and then the guys that were on our bargaining teams. At one point in time, we were told on occasion that Scott Wienia was going to be joining us, but that didn't happen. Up until the last bargaining session when Sean did attend. So I would like to throw it out there, if this group so chooses to feel free to participate in the process. I think it lends itself well to building a relationship, and that's what we want to do. So The rest of my time, I'm just going to open up to any questions, any comments. Like I said, I think that for the most part, either Sam or I has covered everything that is contained here. And so basically what we're here to do is to ask if there's anything else that we can provide, any questions that we can answer. Otherwise, we would like to ask the council to take action on this issue.
I guess the one question I had is going through this information, you've listed Sergeant Bluff, LaPorte City, and one other one, Centerville, as cities that have approved the merger. Are there other cities that have not, and where it would be going to a PERB hearing at this time, or?
Well, in a nutshell, these issues come up as each group comes up for negotiations. Okay. 2.5 years ago is when the law changed, but until your contract expires, you're not required to do the recertification election, and you're not required to prepare for negotiations. So, and in the midst of that time, there's several things that have been done behind the scenes. There's been a case that's gone before the Iowa Supreme Court. There's been several PERB cases that were involved about certain specific items changing in the law. So not everybody is up to bat every year, okay? So as these groups are coming, and like I said, probably the first thing that many of these groups did was get extensions on their current contracts. That's what I did with the bulk of mine. Sergeant Bluff, for instance, their contract was 2015 to 2018, and they granted a 2-year extension. And so that's why they're coming up now with this. Same thing here. We had a couple years left on our contract when the law changed. We changed on the eve of the law being passed with our last contract. So as these things come up, and there will be more, but to this point, like I said, LaPorte City, Centerville was actually 4 groups. That 2 groups combined, the other 2 groups combined, and then those 2 groups combined. So where there were actually 3 mergers there. There will be 3 mergers in Sergeant Bluff. The City Council in Sergeant Bluff went ahead and approved to add clerical as soon as the Public Works and Police are joined. PERB's instructions to ours, we can only do 2 at a time. Is that?
Okay.
Mayor, just to add, from my perspective and my knowledge is that we would be the first ones if we did not approve.
That's correct.
So therefore, we would be the case study for the state of Iowa when it comes to this merger. So.
That's correct. Yeah, essentially, all the groups that they've done now, it produces about maybe a half a page order. And there's none of the case documentation that goes with that. So like I said, Tom is correct in his assumption that that would be the precedent or the case law that would be used by subsequent groups when they're addressing this same issue. So in a sense, you're fourth, but you might be first.
All right. Thank you, Preston. Council members, are there any others of you that have questions?
Sam, in your report, you've stated here that if we were to oppose the merger and a PERB hearing triggered, that there would be the likelihood of a live hearing, and in the notes here it says with at least 75 legal hours and the ability for both sides to call witnesses. Any idea what kind of cost we would be looking at incurring to go down that road?
Probably a minimum of $15,000.
And to go further down that road, a minimum of $15,000 would constitute what's written here. But since this is a case study, is it possible that there would be a good likelihood of additional costs over time before PERB would be able to close the hearing and make a decision?
There is.
If I could interject, the hearing would be called within 30 days, and then based upon the current backlog, that case would remain open most likely until September, maybe October, September of the following year. And in that time, the per board, could request additional information. And from what I've been told and from what I've participated, all of these hearings are in person.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody on my left, any questions or comments that you have at this time?
Have we gotten feedback from the people involved?
The employees?
Yeah.
The feedback has been positive,
Okay.
and the employees signed a letter that had been presented on the 18th of September.
That letter was signed by all AFSCME members and those that are not members.
And I might add, the recertifications also went through unanimously. The unions voted to retain.
Sean or Brad, anything to add?
No,
Okay.
do we have to represent ourselves? I mean, we can just take the opinion that we've had before where we took no action on it and present that at the hearing in Des Moines. We don't have to defend. We just don't want to take an action on it. So is that an option we have when we have this live hearing? Because if we haven't taken a decision on this at the last council meeting, so if we don't act on it, that's kind of our case. It's out of our hands. It should be a union issue, not a city issue.
But isn't that what triggers the hearing?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to speak to that?
I certainly would.
So, this gets a bit complicated, but keep in mind that as a public employer is in a relationship with its employees that's governed by the Iowa Code, okay? And the Iowa Code says in the public employment context, employees have the right to organize, and there's bargaining rights that come with that. So this is all governed by the Iowa Code. It's just part of the legal relationship the city's in. And if two units request to merge and their public employer says, we won't stipulate to that, it will go to PERB. That's just the way the system works. Now, in theory, that public employer could say, we're not going to stipulate, and therefore, PERB will have to make the decision. If the city would not participate, it would be in default, but PERB would still have to make a decision. What we know at this point is that in a handful of instances, when there has been a request to merge, and the city and the units have stipulated that it's appropriate, PERB has approved that. So we don't know this for sure, but most likely, if the city didn't stipulate to the merger, it then went to PERB. PERB thus far has not opposed those mergers. And if the city isn't there to present evidence and make argument, it would seem likely that PERB would say, well, we've let these go through before or approved them by order before, and we'll do it again. Is that a guaranteed result? No, but that seems the most likely result. And if it's the most likely result, by not stipulating, it seems most likely that all the public employer would be doing, the city would be doing, is delaying the inevitable approval of the merger. I don't know if that addresses your question, but that's what I think would happen in that context.
Okay.
We are, as a city, by law, part of the process because that's the legal relationship you're in.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Preston, Marv has a question. I'm going to ask you to have a seat. And Marv, if you come forward, please.
I'd like to have a piece of paper with the guys got too.
Oh, right there. You can have that one.
Mix them for these guys too if you got them.
Just go ahead and have a seat, Preston, if you wouldn't mind.
Last time we discussed this, there was a letter that these guys signed, officers and so forth, and then the council was invited to join the union and join them. I took complete offense to them because I know he's a council, and I think you understand that. I know you don't understand that. That you represent the citizens of Sheldon, not the union boss and the union. And I appreciate that you take that stand. On this whole situation here is what happened is that the union has found a way, like they always do, to try to circumvent the law as Iowa passed it on this insurance thing. It's mainly about insurance. That's all it's about. And you guys are left with a task to figure out what to do. And the first thing they do, they throw at you, it's going to cost you a lot of money. It probably is going to cost you a lot of money to Micah, and that's the way it is. $15,000. I'm going to tell you something. If you approve this and let them merge, it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's factual.
Based on what, Mark?
Based on what?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going by what last year, if we would have got a bid from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, we could have saved approximately $8,000 to $10,000 per employee. That's 32 employees. That's $320,000. That's what that's based on.
Okay.
A bid from Sioux Falls for what?
Now, we'll go into this later. We'll go into this later when we start talking about insurance down the road here. We're not here talking about that tonight. But the fact of the matter is, you have a responsibility to the citizens of Sheldon. And I believe the best way to handle this is, if that's what they want to do, let them go do it. I agree, Brad. Let them go do it. If we got to show up, I guess we're going to have to show up. Maybe a couple of councilmen can show up. It's just as simple as this. The police officers are public safety. I'll acknowledge that. They are public safety. The rest of the employees are not. And that's not throwing a slam at anybody. It's all about the insurance and the money. And furthermore, down the road, if they would so-called win this thing, and we get financially strapped, there's only one way to take care of that. You get rid of employees. I've been in business for 40 years. I know how this gig goes. That's the only way you can handle them deals. You can't keep bowing down to the union all the time. I appreciate our officers. That sheet of paper they signed, I don't think there's anything, I don't know, it doesn't appear to me like there'd be any privacy at all. I don't know how it was done, if it was done in secret or what. I kind of doubt it. That isn't the way unions are normally operate. But let them run the union the way they want to. We'll run the city the way we want to run the city. As far as LaPorte City and so forth, say, go to LaPorte City. Go to LaPorte City if you want to do this. This is Sheldon, Iowa. This isn't Sioux City. This isn't LaPorte City. This isn't Des Moines. It's Sheldon, Iowa. It's what we can afford. You got to look at your money down the road too, and we are strapped people. So I just thought I'd throw that in. I hope you guys let it go, and they take you. If you got to go to hearing, fight them. It should be very simple. I don't think it take that many hours myself. Just as simple as this.
Can I ask you a question, Mark?
Yep, go ahead.
If it does end up costing us $15,000, you okay with that?
Pardon me?
If it does end up costing us $15,000?
Absolutely, because I think I'm betting on the come here. I go to bet you that you'll win this thing. When you're looking at this kind of money,
That's a
that you
minimum,
can,
of course.
that's right, but it certainly isn't going to cost you $320,000.
Well,
But in all likelihood, the results are going to end up the same anyway.
right.
As Micah just stated, it's
Well,
most likely
just to
going
clarify, I was speaking to the
They might have you scared that way. They don't have me scared that way. I can tell you that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mayor.
Go ahead.
The situation I was addressing is if the city doesn't stipulate and doesn't participate in the hearing process, it would be my best guess that the result would be the same as if you had stipulated, just delayed. I was not making a guess as to what would happen if you decided to vigorously contest.
Okay. All right.
I've been in business before. Sometimes you got to spend money to make money. I think if we spend this money, we're going to end up making money, one way or the other.
If I might, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank you for the concerns that you raised, and I think the explanation that I have written out is very balanced and allows you to make an informed decision. I think it is important that the cooperation that we've had this year with the union has saved the taxpayers $40,000 conservative estimate in year one alone, and that's because 19 of our 31 employees switched to a health savings account mid-cycle, and that could not have been done without cooperation of the unions. One of the things that I had thought about recommending to the council, and after talking to Micah, I didn't, but one of the strategies I thought of was, well, let's let Sergeant Bluff and other communities test this water for us. And so let's say no to the stipulation, because we know it would take a year for PERB to hear it, and then we let it work out elsewhere, and then we decide later on, well, you know what, we think we might be able to make this work, and then just before a hearing, kind of like you're settling a court action, you say, well, we'll support this at the last minute. And then talking to Micah, he complimented me on being creative, but said that would antagonize PERB, and that really isn't the way to go. But just want everybody to know we did walk around the lantern on this issue. I do appreciate the statements that have been made earlier in clarifying what was stated on the 18th, and I stand by for any additional questions.
Any comments at this time? I just have a couple. Looking back at when the employees were unionized, in the 7 years that I was involved, it was never an issue. The negotiation went smoothly, and they were taken care of. And I don't see that changing at all. Getting along. I mean, that's really what we want to do. You mentioned, Marv, we have a responsibility as citizens of Sheldon, and I agree, we do. Our employees are citizens of Sheldon, and we have a responsibility to our employees as well. It's not a us versus them. It's all of us together working for the best solution possible. And if this is what the employees want, I think this is the direction we need to move, just as a show of support to them, if nothing else. I've looked through the pros and the cons that Sam has listed there, and to me the positives far outweigh. And for the sake of morale within the departments, I think this is the way to go. I think we approve it as Sam has listed there.
I think we can all agree that the insurance element of this particular, this piece of the puzzle is one that's going to be the most contentious. And I'm looking, to figure out with the hole that we're in financially, how best we can navigate our way out of that while still being competitive in the marketplace. I think that there is going to need to be some give and take here. And that will be something that will be more addressed as we enter into budget time. But for as much sentiment as there is out there about the amount of money being spent and the readiness for some of the citizens to be able to take that, to want to take that completely away and start over, I don't view that as being a viable option. But I think we need to start laying the groundwork for some changes, and with that comes compromise. And I think this is where we start down that path.
I just want to make a comment about the narrative that we are hearing in some of the comments tonight. This is not, in the opinion of this council or this councilman, a us against the union situation. We appreciate everything that our employees do. Now, so this isn't anti-union versus pro-union decision. This is an employer trying to position and work well and cooperatively with its employees in meeting some of the challenges that we've heard tonight as well. One of them is insurance. But it's also at every other benefit that we're going to have to look at as a city and as an employer, and you guys will have to look at it as an employee as well. So I want to make sure that I make it clear from my perspective that this is not a narrative between us against them. What we want to do and what we will vigorously do is we will negotiate fairly and openly with our employees to meet the needs of the city, which includes its employees. And that doesn't change. If we didn't have a union involved, we would have the same challenge if we didn't have the union involved. So I want to make sure it's clear that this is not the city against the union. And I'll let it sit at that.
And we are ready for a motion, I think. There's no other comments.
One other thing I got, when they say, if you approve this, you've lost the war. I'm just telling you that. You've lost the war.
That's your opinion. Thank you. Sam has listed our main options on page 6 of his report. I would encourage you to consider one of those so we can get this on the table and have a decision. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Terry Broxma. I want to compliment Sam. The one portion of the challenges that I want to point out to you guys to remember is the one that says lack of precedent for merger in this new era. Also, the new law of 2% property tax increases threshold impacts the ability to have contracts longer than 1 year. This is truly a circumvention of the purpose of the law and should not be, embraced by any means. I agree with Brad. Drop it.
Thank you. If no one is going to make a motion, then we're going to move forward. On we go. No action. Moving on to the new business. First item there under 5A is an amendment to the zoning ordinance pertaining to the downtown residential use. We are now to the point where we're second reading of the ordinance, amending the zoning ordinance by amending section 12.3 pertaining to residential uses in business commercial downtown district. Comments?
If I might, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to make a comment. There was a concern raised to me this afternoon regarding the parking issue, and I wanted to clarify that. And the concern was raised in this context. Sam, I have heard, quote, any parking can be provided, end quote, and I also have heard private parking on specific property. So this creates two different scenarios. The first might allow for a landlord/property owner with 8 private parking spaces on his property to lease the excess parking to another landlord or property owner. And the second scenario is more restrictive and the specific requirement and would not allow for those excess spaces to be quote-unquote let to another property, attempting to meet the necessary criteria for the ordinance. The short answer to that is the first, is that the ordinance would allow someone to present a private lease rental agreement to the Board of Adjustment for off-street parking that is not on the lot. But it would not allow someone to say, well, there's plenty of spots at the city lot. Let me give you an example. So there's a parking lot north of the theater owned by Al Katz. And it's just an example I've thought of this afternoon. I haven't talked to Al about this. Theoretically, he could rent those parking spots to someone downtown, and the people, as part of their application to the Board of Adjustment, could include a copy of that rental agreement and ask the Board of Adjustment if that will fly with them. And the Board of Adjustment has the authority to say, you know what, it's too far. It doesn't work. We're concerned about people parking in front of downtown businesses. So we could button this down even further, but right now it is set up so that it does allow lease parking on private property.
Do you have something you would like to say, Daryl?
Yeah, this is the time.
Now's the time.
All right.
State your name.
I'm Daryl Burns, and I'm on the Board of Adjustments. And when I heard the report about how individual cases could come to the Board of Adjustments and we could do stipulations, I thought, no, they have the wrong wordage. And then I read it in another publication, and it's kind of like, ooh. Well, on the time I've been on that board, we either vote yes or we vote no. Now, they went back to 2010 and found property. And again, the way I recall it is we voted yes. It was the bank that had the stipulations, but I think those were in there just as a reminder, not part of the motion itself. You can't go backwards, but going forwards, before we get this issue thrown at our board, I highly recommend the council get some education for us, because I can't imagine we have that kind of authority. We have the authority to vote yes or no, but we don't have stipulations. Does that make sense? And I mean, I've been going back a lot of years trying to think, and I've talked to other members, and they have a general consensus that I do. So I would highly recommend the council get it on what's up.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what you're really asking for is a clear-cut definition of what you would vote yes or no against, correct, on the board?
Well, when I first heard it, it's like, hey, they're coming to the wrong board. That's not what our board does. And then all of a sudden they're saying, yeah, it is. And it's like, who says that? And that's where we need to get educated.
And that's what I'm trying to define by educated. or your definition of educated would mean clear-cut written criteria on what would pass or what wouldn't pass, correct? That's what you would want from...
No. I want to know, do we even have the authority? My understanding and my history has been we vote yes or no on projects, period.
Right, and that's where I'm alluding to.
Exactly.
So what do you need, what would you need in this, for this particular ordinance to vote yes or no against?
Well, I don't care about that ordinance, any ordinance. I don't think we have the right to negotiate and say, well, if you do this, then we're going to approve it. No, we just say, and we even asked, could it be tabled? And they said, nope, you have to vote it up or down now because it's a legal hearing. And so I just want to make sure we're ahead of the curve and doing it right, because if we make a decision, it can go. I don't want to be part of that. And so education, I think, is the important key.
So, Daryl, just for those of us, myself included, who've not been on the Board of Adjustment, kind of what happens when the board meets and talks about a specific project.
So a project comes out and it doesn't hit the code and it's denied. And then it goes within the property certified notification. And when the hearing's going to be, then anybody can attend and either oppose or support the project. And at that point, decision yes or no on that. And
so you still would feel comfortable making a decision on whether or not to grant and keep the stipulation thing out of it. But even if it followed through with the...
want to know, what does the code say we are or are not supposed to do? Because I'm confused at this point. That's what I want to know.
Sure.
What is our...
I have a question for you. So when the request came from Top Notch and the Eagles Club building across the street here,
We haven't had any. Board of Adjustments hasn't had any.
Oh, okay.
This is all, yeah.
It wouldn't be allowed under the current ordinance.
Correct.
Even to go to the Board of Adjustment would not be allowed under the current ordinance.
Mayor, would you like me to speak to the
Would you
process?
please? Yes, if you have
So,
some
Daryl,
clarification.
some good questions and points that you've raised. In response to Councilman Barahona's question, I think what you described is the procedure that the Board of Adjustment follows for a variance. Okay? In this specific instance, what the council is being asked to approve in a form of an ordinance goes to a special exception use. All right? So what's before the council is whether or not a dwelling unit on a ground floor downtown would be a special exception use. To get a special exception, you have to go to the Board of Adjustment. And under Article 20.4, this is what it says. In granting any special exception, the Board of Adjustment may prescribe appropriate conditions and safeguards in conformity with this ordinance. In other words, unlike the variance procedure, if someone asks for a special use permit or special use exception, the Board of Adjustment can say, yes, provided you meet these conditions. This number of off-street parking spots, or provided you have access from this vantage point into the context, the special exception context, the board could prescribe certain conditions or stipulations before approval.
So it's the Board of Adjustments, not the zone.
Special exceptions come before the Board of Adjustment, and that's under Article 26 of the code. And you're right, very few of those have come before the board in recent history.
I guess
very few.
We had one and we didn't even know it.
Okay.
Back in 2010. So, yeah. All right. But anyway,
Yeah.
I still would ask that we have a Board of Adjustments meeting to get educated to make sure we're right before anything besides the variances we can handle pretty good. This other stuff, we need education.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daryl.
Thank you, Daryl. Any further comments during this reading?
I'm Terry Broxma. I'm on the Board of Adjustments also. Question for council. We have been advised by city attorneys prior to this that if there's any objections in writing or verbal to an exception, or a variance exception, I suppose is what they were addressing, that we were advised to deny the exception. If we continue on this vein, I want you to address, as Daryl has said, if we continue with that process, whether it's a variance or a special exception, we get any objections, we're going to deny the request because we don't want to put the city at risk for liability. And that's what we've been told we would do if we didn't follow that process. And I talked to Sam this afternoon about, as far as I know, we followed that fairly, strictly as long as I've been on the board. We don't negotiate. We've had a couple instances where people have withdrawn their application when they knew they weren't going to get it approved. But we did not negotiate. So we need to have that cleared up. That's the education I need.
Mike, answer that. You have anything else you'd like to reply to?
I didn't know if that was a question or a comment or...
If you have no response, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm certainly not opposed. I'm sure the city administrator is not opposed either to reviewing the applicable portions of the zoning code to review what the criteria are and what the process is. That's entirely appropriate.
So, Daryl, when you said you need an education, and that would be in a hypothetical situation, or if it actually comes that you're going to be faced with a decision, having to make a decision?
I don't believe in crisis management. And so education helps us be prepared for what comes.
Okay. So, we can make that arrangement at some point.
And as to the comment about prior advice in the context of an objection, I wasn't privy to that conversation, so I don't know exactly what it was.
As far as former counsel or former legal counsel?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to visit with the board about that particular issue if they would like.
Okay.
If I may.
Yes.
So one very recent example would be when Corner Can Redemption was looking at moving into the former Chinese chef building. That's an example of the process working exactly as it should in the same type of situation. That was a special exception, not a variance. The code specifically said you could have limited warehousing facilities in downtown if the Board of Adjustment granted a special exception. So to prepare for that hearing, I printed off the same information that we'll provide as part of the training, but I printed that information off to get ready for that hearing, but then it ended up being tabled because they withdrew their request. So we'll dust that off, and we'll make sure that you have. It might be in the same meeting though, Daryl, but you will be trained. Okay.
Right. Council, anything else you'd like to add at this point? Do we want to move it on to a third reading, or do you want to waive that?
Does that need to be cleaned up?
It's up to you. I think it works. But I completely understand the concern and the desire to button it up even more. But I think you have a good board of adjustment, and I think you've always had a good board of adjustment, and I think you've got a good process that's laid out in the ordinance. And I think that the problem is if we button it up too tight, you run into a situation where if you have a building that's on multiple lots, like for example on the parking issue, going back to that issue, and you have multiple lots, or let's say somebody buys the Eagles Club building, and they also want to own the HC Lane building, and they want to park behind the Eagles Club building. You've tied the hands of the Board of Adjustment from being able to consider that as an option. So I think you, given all the discussion you've had, you probably want to go to a third reading. I would recommend you approve second reading and see if you have any more issues come up with third.
I would move we go to the third reading.
The motion should be to approve second reading.
Approve second reading.
Can we combine those into one, or does it have to be two separate?
It's automatic. If you approve second reading and don't waive the third, then you're going to have a third reading.
All right.
I'll support his motion.
Discussion? Everybody understands the motion? Roll call, please.
Eggers.
Aye.
Hint.
Aye.
Brewster.
Aye.
Farahona.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
All right, moving on to item B, the third reading of the ordinance amending section 105.10 of the Code of Ordinances pertaining to waste storage containers. Open up discussion for that, please. Council first. Let me hold on, Marv. Just any comments from council? Council, am I right? Okay, Marv.
Yeah, Marvin Reason. Just something briefly. I want to give you a little history, then I got to leave here shortly. I did some checking, and you're in a peculiar spot, I know. But I checked Orange City Sanitation. They get $14.60 a month. We pay $17. They pick up garbage once a week. They recycle once a week, and I'm all for recycling. That's a nice deal, particularly once a week. They give two big containers to each customer. Doesn't cost anything. Right now, I just checked yesterday, it's a six-year contract, no increase. Wages. The city gets $1 off that $14. I think the city of Sheldon gets $1.50. So if you look at so you can figure that out. Over there, the city gets all their garbage in their facilities picked up for nothing. And they do raise the price on the fee if the landfill goes up $1, they raise it 10 cents. Now, I guess I'm not going to go into detail, but the way it looks to me, with Sheldon, we're paying for our same-sized town, approximately, we're spending probably right around 80, if you factor in everything, $80,000, $90,000 more as a community than they are. I know we're in a contract. I've been in contracts all my life in business. You're going to have to uphold that contract. You're going to get a couple other days, I guess, pick up a recycle that at least helps. They're going to have to buy their own garbage cans. I guess that's coming down the road anyhow, no matter which one you take down the road. So, but down the road, that may be negotiated in the price. Because this will, no doubt in my mind, go in for bids in a few years. So sorry to say that, but I think that's where we're headed. But I suppose you're going to have to approve something like that, and we'll just have to, that way you're done messing with it.
Hopefully we will get a grant for the recycling containers. So
well,
we're working on that.
Okay, that's nice. I hate to tell them, but that's the only route I can do. I have nothing against the garbage haulers. It's a good garbage hauler. Nothing wrong with them, And I know they probably take offense to what I say, but it isn't against them, but just that we got to get in line with things to save people some money. Okay? Thank you.
All right. I think we're at a point where we can take a motion on this.
I'll make motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Verhona. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Hamel.
Aye.
Verhona.
Aye.
Brewster.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
Hint.
Aye.
All right, item 5C, third reading of an ordinance amending section 106.04 of the Code of Ordinances pertaining to frequency of recycling collection. Any comments on that?
Make motion to approve.
Second.
Comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Brewster.
Aye.
Verhona.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
Hint.
Aye.
And item D, second reading of an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances by adding a new section pertaining to operating budget preparation.
Mike?
Yes, please.
Mayor, in front of you, council members, I put this sample agenda of what the budget process will look like under this new ordinance. Not a lot of change. Two of the key changes is under 2C subpart A, instead of saying levy, it says property tax revenue. The focus is now on the property tax revenue rather than the levy per se. And then under the key dates, we now have an extra 2 weeks to finish the budget. And in between there is an opportunity, if we need to have the second public hearing as required by law, if so triggered. In talking to some of my fellow city managers, because growth is not exempted under the 2% law, you would hope that you would have an extra hearing or discussion on that, because it means then that you're not growing if you're not having a conversation on that 2%. Now you have the opportunity, if you want, of course, to leave growth on the table, which we have done in the past. But anyway, that's what this new process is about, is to facilitate that discussion. So if I might, if we just take a moment to look at the agenda too, because I have the dates filled in, and if anybody has any major issues with the dates on the 22nd and 21st of January, I heard from one of the council members that's wrestling week, so we may have some issues there, but we can work through that. But we could also have the meetings start earlier. I have them at 4:30, just like last year. If you want, we could have them at 4. Keep them the same, 4:30?
I think 4:30 is good. It gives more people opportunity to participate.
Two.
Right. Anyway, that's draft, and we'll come back for further discussion. But if you have any concern, try to let me know between now and the next meeting.
Okay.
If there's no concern, I would recommend approval of second reading and waiving the third.
I was just going to say that.
I'll make a motion to approve and waive the
Approve
third
second
reading.
and waive third.
Support.
Questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Eggers.
Approve.
Brewster.
Aye.
Verhona.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
Hint.
Aye.
All right. Now let's move on to rezoning of the 1220 2nd Avenue, former DOT County Shed. I'd like to open the public hearing at this time. Are there any comments to be made? Seeing none, take a motion to close the hearing.
Make that motion to close.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Hamel.
Aye.
Hint.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
Verhona.
Aye.
Brewster.
Aye.
All right, then we have a resolution approving amendment to the zoning ordinance to rezone 1220 2nd Avenue from heavy industrial to arterial commercial. Discussion?
Make the motion to approve.
Support.
Questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Farahona.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
Brewster.
Aye.
Kent.
Aye.
All right, so then.
You can approve first reading now.
Okay, and then let's move forward then with the first reading of the ordinance to rezone 12 22nd Avenue from heavy industrial to arterial commercial.
If I might, Mr. Mayor.
Would you please?
Now, it's the next item that is more of a citywide discussion on the how the next item will affect the entire community. But this item is the rezoning only of this property. So you would be within, and we would receive no concerns at all on the rezoning, and you could certainly approve first reading and waive second and third of the rezone if you wanted. And that would require a 4/5 vote to do so.
I would move that we do that.
Support.
Questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Hamel.
Aye.
Kent.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
Brewster.
Aye.
Farahona.
Aye.
All right. Now on to item F, amendment to the zoning ordinance pertaining to second floor residential use in arterial commercial. We'll open the public hearing on that. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, motion to close that hearing.
So moved.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Kent.
Aye.
Brewster.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
Farahona.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
Then let's move on to a resolution approving amendment to the zoning ordinance by amending section 11.3 pertaining to residential uses in the arterial commercial district. Entertain a motion to approve that.
So motion to approve.
Support. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Kent.
Aye.
Brewster.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
Farahona.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
Second reading on December 18th.
Okay. So we considered, we've done the three then as well. Approved the resolution now.
Yeah, you approved the resolution already,
Okay.
right?
Okay, yes. Yes. Okay, so first reading of the ordinance, amending the zoning ordinance is today. December 18 will be our second reading. That's what you're saying? That's correct. All right. We don't need any action, more motion on that. Okay, all right. Ready to move on? Update of the 16th Street project and consider pay estimate number 4. Todd, that would be you?
Yeah, Omni Engineering's subcontractors were back in town recently. They did Edge Mill 16th Street and did lay a new wear course over 16th Street. By doing so, they repaired the crown issue that they had failed to keep, and also got rid of the surface segregation issue that we were concerned about before. So I'm happy with the asphalt surface. They did also come back then and raise the manholes up to a certain level. And they did replace one driveway that had failed to pass inspection. Fortunately, that driveway I'm going to deny again. They did a very good job. And that's not very long. But with that being said, if you approve this pay request, we'll still be withholding $29,000 in retainage, along with $22,000 in liquidated damages that hopefully assess for the tardiness of the work. So I'm okay with approving. We have plenty of money left to cover the one minor issue.
Todd, could you repeat those figures that you just gave?
We have $29,000 and change in retainage. $29,292.86 retainage, and I don't have the exact figure in front of me, just over $22,000. We discussed, it's been so long ago, but a year or so ago, we discussed withholding that because of their charges. We still have that, so just over $51,000 still.
So that would be their penalties for being late then?
No, I would expect once they come back and fix the driveway, we would pay the $29,000 retainage, but we would likely try to withhold the $22,000.
Okay, all right.
So today's pay estimate is in the amount of $58,416.83. Do we have a motion to pay that?
So move.
Support. Questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Hamel?
Aye.
Farahona?
Aye.
Brewster?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
Kent?
Aye.
All right, then moving on to the public comment period for December 11 goal-setting meeting. Sam, something you'd like to comment on?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. I handed out copies of the goal-setting report for the last two sessions, 2015 and 2017. That will form the core of the discussion, plus the surveys that have been sent to all of you to be returned back to Eric. And I won't name names, but there's a couple of you that need to get surveys back to.
Mine was sent in.
Yeah, okay.
You sent mine?
I don't know who it was. Cause I don't,
Well, his eye contact, he was looking like straight at me.
He's looking right through you.
You just happened to be sitting down.
Yeah, I've had teachers look at me like that. You're the
I'll look
guilty
this
party.
way. All right. So,
But I can submit them again if you want.
anyway, so this is the time if anybody would like to provide to the council input on some of the things that they would like to see the council discuss at the goal setting. The goal setting session, of course, is open to the public, but there will not be a public comment period at that meeting.
So if there are no comments, let's move on then to reports. Airport Commission, you're up for presentation on the 5-year capital improvement plan.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, my name is Josh.
State your name, please.
Josh Fryemrick. I was going to get to that point. Resident of Sheldon and member of the Airport Commission. Just like to introduce you to Andy Mason. He's going to give you the details of the report that Todd gave last week. But before I do that, I just want to point your attention to a little presentation I sent over Sam earlier today that he should have printed out for each one of you. The request today is just to approval of the plan to submit to the FAA. It's not actually approval of any budgetary funds for that submission. We had a little goal planning session internally as the Airport Commission, and a couple things we pointed out we'd like to see taken care of in the next few years in terms of liabilities and maintenance issues and stuff. And one is a parallel taxiway to the runway that is there. And Andy will touch on that a little bit more. Also, self-serve fuel at the FBO. Many pilots and stuff don't actually come to the Sheldon Airport if they can get self-serve fuel in other locations. They'll drive some revenue to the city and some economic activity. I just want to point you to that. That's the first page on the report. On the second page of that report, I sent over to Sam just some statistics on the Sheldon Airport. Over $1 million annual economic activity is produced by the airport. A little over 100 medical flights. I talked to Sanford earlier this week about that, and they're very, very supportive of the airport and capital improvements, so we may be going to that. Just a couple more stats. 3 out of every 4 flights, people in Sheldon are general aviation. So every time you go to Sioux City and take a flight, there's 3 flights on Sheldon that go to the airport here. So just a lot of economic activity and use there. And just some statistics on the airport, about 10% annual increase in operations every year for the last 10 years. Last year data, FAA is 2017, so that's 2007 to 2017. On the bottom there is just some comparison to the airports around us and what we do to those as well. And then,
Josh, on your 10% annual increase in airport operations, are you saying utilization?
Correct. Airport operations would be landings, takeoffs, that kind of thing for the FAA.
Thank you.
You can see it was FA estimates 4,745 in 2007 and 9,541 for the last year we have data on. And the last page is just a letter to the city council from some business people in the town and some charitable organizations and stuff that value the Sheldon Airport and everything it does for the community and the area around it. So I encourage you to read through that and to go through the entire thing right now. And with that, I'll turn over to Andy to kind of present the plan and unless you got any questions.
Okay, thanks, Josh.
Yeah, good evening. Andy Mason with McClure. McClure Engineering has been retained by the airport to represent the airport as their airport engineer. Each year, the DOT through the FAA program requires airports to submit their annual CIP. So we're going through the process with the airport over the past few months, trying to prioritize which projects are most critical to their development and growth. The final submission on this plan to the FAA and the DOT is December 20th. So we wanted to take this before council, as it will require some local resources to match those federal grants. There are state grants that are 85% state funded and 15% local match required, and then the federal FAA grants are at 90% grant from the federal government through the FAA, and those require a 10% local match. So going through the process with the airports, they, as Josh mentioned earlier, the first critical one is upgrading their fuel system to provide some self-service fuel via a credit card reader system. So that would be a DOT grant in fiscal year 2021, as you can see on your handouts there. And then looking into future years, they want to go through on a parallel taxiway program through FAA grants that would be the 90% funded, reimbursed by the FAA. The parallel taxiways, I'll just give a little background on those. Those provide a facility for aircraft to taxi to the runway for takeoff and landings and not have to require back taxiing on the actual runway when it's active. So if you can envision during periods of low visibility, if you have an aircraft on the runway taxiing for takeoff, there's that opportunity if an aircraft is landing and departing at the same time, there could be a potential safety concern there. So that's the value of constructing a parallel taxiway. You separate the high-speed aircraft from landing and departing to the aircraft on approach, if you will. So I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to add on that, but the FAA does request that the first two fiscal years, so fiscal year 21 and 22, that the city provide the local match if the grant is issued. So that's where we're at today, and open it up for any questions. Thanks.
Brian Becker here, and I was just coming here to support what Josh has presented in addition to Andy, and also just kind of paint the picture that it's just not a bunch of rich guys out there with toys. There is actually a pretty significant economic benefit to having a well-functioning airport out there. We've got a lot of ideas as a commission in terms of different updates that we'd like to have done in the future, and our plan today was more so to just let you be more aware of what kind of those thoughts are, so that you're not blindsided on the back end of us coming in begging for money, because that's what everybody does when it comes to coming to the board here, I guess, when it comes to the city council. So more so just to bring a little bit more awareness to what we have hoped and planned, and also to hopefully in the future here, near future at least, get your support for it as well.
Sam, I guess I'm going to ask you this question. What is our current level of funding for the city towards the airport at this point? Or how does that work?
it's year by year, and one of the things that Todd and I and the commission have discussed is our desire to have more capital improvements planning in terms of setting aside. One of the things that we talked about in the last budget cycle, and we weren't able to do it because of the finances at the time, but it is a goal, is on a 90-10 match, so you could do, if you set aside $20,000, then they can do $200,000 worth of projects. That way, when they come up with a good 90-10 project, we're not put in the situation of, wow, we've got this 90% grant out there, and we just need to come up with 10%. Well, that 10% can be a lot of money, and right now we're putting very little aside. Now we do have approximately $54,000 set aside now, which is coverage for an FAA loan that will be paid off middle of next year. So that happens to come in at a very convenient time, and that can be our CIP fund. The reality is we really don't have one. That's part of our vision going forward, is we would like to do that.
I guess, yeah, looking at the numbers here and talking about a 10% match, and I see $320,000 that we would have to bond for. So that
if I might,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but there may be options there. There may be low interest loans available. There may be rural development monies available. There may be other funds available. But it's unlikely that it would all be grant funded.
Well, and I guess maybe more of what I'm trying to ascertain is, are we entering into an all or nothing agreement where capital improvement plan shows $3 million and change dollars worth of improvements that are set to go? I mean, is that whole 5-year plan, is it all or bust, or is it just a wish list and we can kind of cross each one as the funds become available or the opportunities?
Yeah, and I can answer that. Yeah, no, it's not an all or nothing. The FAA just requests those first 2 fiscal years that you guys, when you submit this application, you do, want to go through with those projects. The first 2 years. So we would revisit this annually. Yep.
With that statement, Andy, go ahead. Pete.
If we decide that we want to delay one of these, does that then take the offer off the table, or will they work with that?
They would work with us. Yeah, I think this past year we had to basically say we didn't have the local resources, and yeah, they don't hold it against you, but yeah, obviously they'd prefer you commit to those first 2 projects. Yep.
So, grand scheme of things, what would be those first 2 projects, or the ones that are highlighted in really big marker for the first couple of years?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, so Ryan Becker here. So the first 2 projects would be that 2021, the fuel systems improvement, which is not a big spend when it comes down to it. I mean, I think that'll be a huge benefit when it comes to attracting traffic into the area too. I know just probably myself flying to places, that's one of the first things I look for is not only the fuel prices, but then what kind of facility they have to be able to fuel my plane. Do I have to call somebody out like we do right now, which our current fuel barn or fuel pump is, I think, from the 1960s, I want to say, or something like that. And so then we have to actually have to call Lyle or Carrie or Chad out to actually come fuel planes. So that one would be definitely our first one. Now, the next one going forward, when it comes to the vision, I mean, ultimately we were spent a decent amount of time talking as a commission to figure out kind of what are our next tracks. And Andy was kind of referring to earlier this year, or maybe it was last year, when the FAA came out and said that, hey, we have funds that are 100% covered. What would you like to do? And so then we got all excited about it, because then we're just going to throw out everything. So new taxiway, new runway, a bunch of concrete out there, maybe some hangars. And then they came back and said, well, actually, it's a 90-10 split. And so then we were set in this position where yeah, we didn't have the local funds to match it, and so then we had to kind of come down and get off of our high horse and figure out what to do next. And that's where we kind of shook things up when it comes to the CIP. So the next forward thinking would be, because the runway is in getting to the point of needing some rehab, some repair, and but not to that point yet. And so then our next thought was that, well, if we get to the point where we could, potentially acquire some parcels of land, which we have almost all of what we need except for these few parcels here, in order to kind of think forward when it comes to getting a taxiway placed, to be able to circumnavigate a little bit of the problems with the runway, as Andy had mentioned, about not being able to see from one end to the other. So you're supposed to be able to see a 5-foot figure on the other end, and we can't do that because of the crown and the actual runway right now. So that's where kind of the next step, what we had put in our CIP, was to be thinking about acquiring those parcels of land and kind of working our way towards getting a taxiway, which you can see that the actual taxiway construct would be, I think it was 2025, so it's quite a ways down the road.
So what you're speaking to is in 2022 then?
What's that? I'm sorry.
The land purchase is in 2022?
Correct.
What's in 2023?
That's the design of it, to prepare the drawings and the specifications of it. So that'd just be the design of it.
So everything beyond 2021 is visionary and pretty much wrapped around taxiway.
Correct.
And the crown issue in the main runway, correct?
That and not only the crown, but what we had presented for the rehab project for this 100% match was towards the lateral ends, the edges of the actual runway itself. There's pooling, so then it ices up, and that is a potential safety issue if you land and hit ice and slide. And I know we've got a bunch of nice new equipment out there now. I appreciate the city council with that. So, I mean, we're hoping to mitigate some of that risk, at least for the time being. Okay. But it was going to be very expensive to not only go through the survey and the study to be able to figure out what to do, but then the next step was to actually rehab it and not necessarily replace it. But yes, so the vision would be towards getting ultimately a taxiway in the future.
So
have you? Oh, I'm sorry.
So my question would be then is that does the land need to be bought before the preparation?
Yes. Yeah. Parcels 7 and 8 would be required if you wanted to build that taxiway.
No, I'm saying though, in order though, does it need to be bought before you start making plans?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And can you tell me why?
Yeah, they want to make sure that you're not going to spend the resources on designing the project when you don't own the land. So they will require you to own the land in case, last second you guys pulled the plug on the project and didn't want to go through with the land acquisition. You'd have these plans just on the shelf that weren't any good. So, yeah, they want you to assure that the land is purchased first.
Sure.
Yeah.
And those land figures are...
Yeah, we did our best based on, I think we were an acreage. We were about 13.5 an acre. It's down by the Floyd River. So, we tried to do our best estimate on that. Yeah.
And have you talked to the landowners about this? Is this on anyone's radar?
Not formally yet. This is just the preliminary. Yeah. Then, as that approaches, we would initiate those conversations.
Gotcha.
I guess one of the challenges I have is that I really don't understand the vision real well yet, and I'm probably not the only one in town that would probably say exactly the same thing. And if we're going to go out and buy land without me knowing why we're going out and buy land, that's kind of, to me, in my book, kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit. I understand what Andy's explaining about as far as don't want to spend money to make plans we don't have. But I really think that the vision needs to be more available to the public so they understand, because I know there's questions out there about how economic development out there, more businesses utilizing our airport, bringing in more revenue and taxable revenue from that as well. So I'd really like to hear what the commission's vision is for that well before I go out and buy land.
Sure.
Yeah, just something to add, that there was a master plan that we did about 5 years ago that's available. Maybe we can make it more. It's in PDF document format that we could give. It shows the goals of the airport and the ultimate blueprints, if you will, of the ultimate layouts.
Yeah, I think stuff like that really is important, Andy, because for us to sit there and tell in an environment where we really need to look at our budget very closely and commit in the second year to $52,000. I think we need more than just, well, it'd be nice to have 2 taxiways. I think we need to understand a larger vision of that.
We don't have a taxiway right now.
Right.
Yeah, so there's no taxiway right now.
Yeah,
so
excuse me, I misspoke that. By adding a taxiway, I meant.
Right. Yeah, and I think to take a step back to historically, and having only been on the commission for, 2 or 3 years now, historically what we would do with our CIP was that we would kind of put the wish list out there. Well, of course, we'd love to have a crossing runway, which I think would end up taking out a couple of houses now, the way it's all set up too, and then a taxiways, and then moving actually the hangars to a different location, and in addition to the FBO. And as Andy has kind of explained over this past year or so, the FAA doesn't want us to create a wish list that is just that, just a wish list. And they wanted us to create more of a realistic plan and kind of a vision. And so that's why we kind of shook it up this year. And we're hoping to push towards that kind of the vision of the airports. And what do we want? And we want the airport to stay open, because anytime that we close down the airport, especially with Midwest Midwest flying service out there as well, in addition to Sanford, where I work, and using fixed wing occasionally, especially during bad weather. We wanted to be able to keep it open. If we rehab the runway, which is what we were thinking that we were going to try to do, it would shut it down for months, if not even over a year. And so then we're really in a bind, and then we're having to reach across the aisles over there to the neighboring counties to hopefully do our traffic there. But then also with this taxiway future forward thinking is that potentially even using it as a runway, if we can keep it open for a time being. Now that there's some things we have to jump through when it comes to that. But then if we did have to rehab the runway, which would be 5, 6, 7 years down the road, we could potentially still keep it open and still function with the taxiway. So I would agree that we want to be as transparent as possible, and that's why this is one of the first times that we've actually come here. And to speak into what Sam had mentioned as well, we are in a position where I don't know if we have the allocated funds each year necessarily to start building this bank to be able to start supporting these, and we have that $54,000-ish or so that will become available next year, but that's all we have. And there's we have the fundraising here and there that we have, but that's where we're coming to you, thinking that, well, if we could start thinking about potentially setting aside some of those funds, even at 10, 20, whatever thousand, that's up for debate and further details down the road. But then kind of thinking, okay, if we could start building that bank in order to satisfy some of these CIP plans for the future, that was the hope and the goal.
How do you guys make money?
Yeah, I can answer. Yeah, their primary revenue source is land leases that they on airport property to farmers. And then hangar rent is probably the second. I don't, Rob, any other?
And hangar rent essentially breaks even when it comes to that, especially with the new hangar out there that was just there. But
yeah, most we serve a lot of airports throughout the state, but most airports are not self-sufficient, financially. It's more of the economic development. I did want to state that the IIP did a survey of the major employers, and the largest employers rank the factors in when selecting locations to expand businesses or relocate businesses. Behind obviously the workforce availability was number one, but proximity to a commercial service airport was number 3, and then proximity to a GA airport was number 6. So it really gives you guys that competitive advantage of having this airport in your community for prospective businesses. So, but I don't know, Rob, you want to?
Well, I'm Rob Dixon, and been on the commission 25 years, Angie. I don't know, something like that. She's going, huh? But eldest, so to speak, of the current commission members, and our mission is to, ensure that this asset that the city of Sheldon has out here, which is very significant and very important and critical to economic development to our town and the area, maintains its utility, its quality, and safety. And every year we review this CIP in that respect. And it's a good exercise for us, and also it's an exercise required by the FAA annually. And as Andy indicates, in this process, there are 90% funds available from the FAA to support us in these projects that are needed toward our mission. And the first 2 years of this plan require a commitment from the council. In what respect? They don't have to actually budget, but
no, if the federal funds became available, they would want you to go through with that project.
So yes, we would have to budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to
Through the
budget.
plan, you should have the first 2 years plan.
yes.
That's why we're having a discussion we're having, Rob.
Because, yeah, to me, someone who's not an aviator, hearing that we need a taxiway means nothing. So, and I also have to try to justify in a climate where we are financially strapped, giving monies to, I need to make sure that we are painting the most clear picture as possible for any sort of additional revenues that are coming out of the city coffers.
Sure.
So I don't want it to sound like that we're really trying to beat this thing down. It is so important that we're clear about what not only what we do now, how things are handled now, but how these improvements will benefit the city and the area.
Correct.
Well, again, the city has a significant asset out there in that airport. And the CIP represents the commission prioritizing the needs that are there to maintain that quality and safety and so on of our airport. And this parallel taxiway is a significant safety enhancement to airport operations out there. And that's why we've given it a second priority, so to speak, here in the second year to begin the process of moving toward accomplishing that. We deem the fuel farm improvements as number one, as it's an aging, mechanically deficient system currently. But that parallel taxiway is, as I say, a significant enhancement to the operations, the safe operations of our airport. Right now, we've got airplanes going up and down the active runway, sometimes unable to see planes at the far end on the ground. And that's a safety hazard, obviously. The parallel taxiway alleviates that. And were we not to consider that, we could be in a spot of having to reconstruct, in essence, the whole runway so as to eliminate that crown that's out there and toward the same safety issue. The parallel taxiway steps in and basically accomplishes the same thing and in a little simpler fashion, and also alleviates and essentially eliminates the threat of having to actually close the airport to accomplish any significant runway construction changes. So,
and then, if I can add, just to kind of, to a certain extent, wrap things up here too. So ultimately, if we tell the public, if Ty types to the public and says we want a parallel runway because we want to be more safe out there, the public is not going to agree with that, just because, as many people do, if you're not in aviation, you just don't understand, what it is, which is fine. But the main thing is our thought going forward is that if we can find a way that we can keep this airport open at all times, then that's our goal. Because as you can kind of see, as what was presented earlier, the economic impact for Sheldon itself. So if we close this down, if we're estimating that it's $1 million a year economic impact to our city, and we close it down for an entire year, I mean, you can see how much impact that would be. So then if we are thinking that, well, maybe this taxiway would be able to alleviate that potential problem, that's kind of what we're thinking, that if we can just really keep the airport open, and by that, this potential taxiway and the acquisition of the land and the planning, et cetera, then that's kind of what we're pushing forward with. I mean, so that's kind of ultimately, of course, safety is a big issue. I don't want to run into a plane when they're taking off either. But safety is a number one concern, of course. But from a city and general layperson in the city, then it would be the economic impact by just keeping the airport open.
What role does the for-profit enterprise that is based at the airport play in its in this whole capital improvement game? Midwest Flying Service obviously has an added benefit. Well, I shouldn't say a benefit, but they're definitely it is their primary source of income, and so incumbent upon us, upon them, to make sure that we are making sure that the airport is in top shape. I want to understand the nature of the relationship between the Midwest Flying Service and the airport and the city, and how that all works together.
Jet Corver, I'm also on the commission. Obviously, shutting down the airport is a disaster for Midwest Flying Service. Not only does their maintenance operation happen out of there, if you close the airport, airplanes from all over the region cannot get in to utilize the service of the mechanic there. So essentially, you have a guy there that makes a living off maintenance that won't be making a living off maintenance while that airport is shut. And obviously, being in public safety, I think a lot about safety. And as far as the parallel taxiway is concerned, think of that runway as a one-lane road. Have you ever been on a one-lane road and it has a curve in it, and you're going around that curve praying there's not someone coming from the other side? That's what we do every time right now. You turn onto that runway and you're praying, and I've had it happen, someone's on that south end where you can't see, they're taking off, you didn't, whatever reason, you missed it on the radio, you got to pull off into the grass to let them by. So close calls have happened, but yeah, it's like a one-lane road. You're just praying that the car coming around the corner sees you in time. And that's where the parallel taxiway eliminates that.
I would comment, too, that the land acquisition issue comes into play, obviously, for sake of the parallel taxiway and allowance for that, but there are also FAA so-called safety zone issues that play into consideration here too, and they require a certain amount of land to form a safety zone around that runway, and so when you're adding parallel taxiways and so on, that comes into play regarding the need for more land.
So to answer your question, I think they average 2 or 3 flights a day, and it might not be all directly right out of Sheldon, but that's what Midwest Flying Service does, and so it's very important to them too.
Sure.
That
and I guess maybe more my question is, do they have a financial stake in the improvement side? Are they kicking any money into this?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. I guess I know there's got to be an agreement between Midwest Flying Service and the airport, and I'm just not being privy to that and just not being very smart in general. Just trying to
They pay us a monthly lease for facilities.
Okay.
And, but their presence and operation is very critical to the general overall activity and enhancement of services we provide out there, and they manage, in essence, the airport.
Don't we need to have somebody manage it for us, the airport? as in Midwest Flying.
I'm guessing that it'd be a regional airport that you have to have a fixed base operator there managing it, or you wouldn't keep your regional designation.
Basically, if we approve this plan, the only thing we're committing to is about $5,800. Thousand, I meant. Excuse me.
Another zero.
Getting ahead of myself. Sorry. So $58,000 is the only thing we're really committing to if we approve this plan.
Well, in dollars, yes.
Yes.
But we're also buying land in it.
Yeah. For a future expansion that we can decide next year if we want to do or not do.
That's beyond
It is.
Yeah.
But remember,
5 years down the road.
But remember, what's beyond is another $260,000 to make that land worthwhile. And what I want to make sure is that you guys don't look at my questions or our questions as trying to put you on the spot. But what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go to the budgeting process, and we're going to have to decide whether that $57,000 is needed somewhere else in the city.
Yeah, and that's why
on issues that are just as important to them, if not more, to the community as a whole. So what I'm hoping that the commission can do is two things. One is to come together with a plan that graduates these dollars required before it commits us as a city in a path, okay? And that's why I was hoping that the planning could happen before the land purchase, because to me that makes sense, because now you can go out and you can show the community, hey, this is what it's going to do. We can say everything you guys have said here, and then we got another year to plan budgetarily wise for it. This is a challenge for us, so...
Yeah, there's a couple other things I just wanted to mention. The land acquisition also includes runway end land purchases. That they need about 40 additional feet to the south to protect their safety area. So you could go through with the land acquisition as a commission or as a council, I'm sorry, and not be required to do the taxiway program. So they can be independent. We could always have the land available for future. So I just want to make sure that was clear. Yep.
Well, that's a good clarification. Because
I would just add, Josh Garb again, part of the reason we put that as a second year was our biggest revenue source is land, and land does not go down in price on a regular basis. And even if we buy that, we push this off every year for the next 10 years, that rent of that farm ground could possibly pay for the purchase of that $50,000 and things. And we know full well that if we don't put it in this plan, the FAA is not going to budget for us. So it's an aggressive plan. We totally agree with that. But we have to put it in there, otherwise it won't ever come to the FAA's attention.
So with that, Josh, is there a way that the commission can be a little less aggressive on the front end and still be progressive in what you want to get done, so that you don't put the city in a spot to where we have to say yay or nay because of a dollar figure? Is there any way that you can reconfigure this in order to ease into it a little easier?
We can make any changes until December 20 when we submit it to them in that regards, and we can push one of those back. But I don't think a regression of the land purchase would the additional cost that happens over time may not be worth the savings of pushing that back.
Well, I guess I would want to focus more on other revenue generating opportunities. Is there any way that the city itself is not on the hook for the whole thing, that we can try and lessen the burden? Mm-hmm. And then again, us not being aviators don't know how that revenue generation works, but I can at least speak for myself, all about growth and improving our facilities, because it is a big feather in our cap for us to have the airport facilities. But I think we would also, as a city, like to see the airport, or the people that are looking to utilize the airport, have a little bit more skin in the game as well. And I don't know if that is, if it's a land rate thing, if it's a hangar rate thing. I don't know if it's going out and doing a pancake supper thing. I don't know that. But I guess what I would like to see is, that that the commission can also be proactive in trying to acquire funds other than just the FAA and us.
Yeah.
Is there anything on the table?
2 points to that. One, the FA funds come from fuel tax that we pay for the fuel that goes into that farm. So the pilots that use it are paying for 90% of that purchase agreement.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So it is coming from the airport, people that use that airport in that regards. And two, we can definitely look at additional revenue sources. The third point in my first page there was, do you have any ideas for that? And we can do some investigative work on other airports and how they do that and come back with some suggestions if you would like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a easier pill to swallow, especially to our constituents, if we can say that everyone's chipping in and working towards this common goal.
Yeah. And even better yet, if they were all in support of it, then they wouldn't have to swallow a pill at all.
Yeah.
They would know why we're doing it and that they feel good about the expense. And I just think that this is on such a rail. You guys haven't had a real opportunity to address that with the community. And,
all right.
And you can see that you're addressing it now with the council. At least a couple of us are excited about it, are interested in how that all works and stuff like that. So it's all good. But you're also looking at a deadline of the 20th, and this discussion would have been a lot easier to have 3 months ago than a week and a half before you have to submit something. So
yeah, well, trust me, we've been talking about this for a long time, and I think a lot of it was because of this previous plan that we had done that we then got told that it was 90-10, so that really set us back quite a ways.
So let me ask this. You don't have a plan by the 20th, what happens?
I'll leave it up to
Yeah, so you submit this every year, so we could come back next year, a year from now, and nothing. You're not going to have a federal project over the course of next year, so it's just.
You're saying you have one shot a year to do this.
Yes, correct. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd like to do it, but it's with only such a limited scope of time before we can actually get everything together. It's going to be...
Okay, we've discussed this enough, I think, at this point, guys. Thank you for all your information. Now it's up to us to make a decision as a council what we want to do with this. Sam has listed out several options, 3 options really. We can approve, we can amend, or we can decline or delay. It's up to us now to make that decision where we want to take it from here. The fuel system to me seems to be a high priority thing. The sooner we get it done, the better, is what I'm hearing. I mean, it's a revenue source, the taxes that come in off of it.
I think it's just up to us to kind of decide before the budgeting process whether we're going to shoehorn in $50-some thousand for a possible land purchase that they're going to pursue based upon this plan. So that's why I was hoping that we could not have to feel like we're on the hook for it.
You will have 2 budgets.
Right.
If you approved it today, you would have 2 budget cycles.
I know.
Yeah.
No, I understand that too. But.
And to have the land, if that land sits there 10 years, it's still available. That it's not being used. I mean, it's there. It's there for expansion. So
that's a good point as well.
So, someone want to make a motion on how we want to move forward with this?
With being said, we have 2 budget years to come up with that extra $50,000. I'll make the motion to approve the plan.
I would support that.
Okay, further discussion? The one thing I was hearing from Wayne, I think, was the additional funding measures. I think along with it, I would like to see that a part of the plan, or the directive to the airport commission, that we look long and hard at they look long and hard at some of the revenue and expenditures, and try and come up with some additional funding outside of the city and the FAA.
But if that's the case, that doesn't lower our obligation. I mean, that's great. There's more money there, but from what understanding reading this, we're still obligated for 10%, whether they come up with money next year or not.
Correct. I think whatever, I maintain my support.
And I think without amending the motion, you can still give them that direction to look at options.
See, I'm willing to support it, but I really do stress and urge the commission to be very proactive and very open about where the vision of our airport is, because it's not part of our everyday discussion in our community, and I think it should be. It's got a place for that. We talk about downtown. We talk about new businesses on the peripheral of our town. We've got a great airport and a great asset to do something with. We need to talk about it. So,
right?
Yes.
Brian back here, not to copycat what happened earlier, but at any rate, so Josh was just saying too, this is about 30 acres of land, and so then renting that out and loaning that out would be about $10,000 a year. So just kind of be thinking about that in the future.
This is all farm ground, because I know you said it was down by the river.
Some will be taxed away, the actual pavement ultimately.
Well, and I guess
Right.
I mean more
Right.
just
the
in
actual
the interim.
parcels that we can rent or lease out.
No, it's not going to be all tillable acres.
Right, it's not all.
No, the end of that runway is steep, falls down off the river. So it might be 30 acres, but there won't be 30 tillable that you can rent. I don't know what that number is.
Sure.
The airport commission.
Yeah.
This again would be good information that I would feel more, I guess, inclined to be excited about it if we had all this stuff here. Again, it just kind of feels like it's kind of being sprung on us.
Right. We've got 4 commission members here today, right? 4 of you plus. Yeah. So consider this your directive as well as we move forward with this. Are there any other comments or discussion regarding the motion on the floor? Then we're going to take a roll call, please.
Brewster.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
Hint.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
Farahona.
No.
All right, moving on to motion carries. Moving on to the city manager report. Sam, do you have anything for
Thank
us?
you, Mayor. Very briefly, I received an offer yesterday from Log Cabin Enterprises for the Sunset and 1023 Garfield. I provided that to the media and to all the council members, and that offer will be with the other pending offers for the Sunset, and DJs will be probably on either the December 18 or one of the January meetings for further discussion. So just a heads up.
Okay. Thank you. Todd, anything you got?
Just one if I can. I did debate for about an hour whether or not I should say anything or not, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't. I'll go back to the old business. Including myself, 14 of the city's 31 employees are under my direction. 6 of those are salaried and 8 of those are and I really hope when you said that not supporting this it doesn't mean we're not going to negotiate fairly. It's a true statement. Because if it's not, and if you're following what I heard from the crowd, which is cut salary, cut insurance, whatever, you are going to handcuff me to the ability to not do my job. I'm only as good as the best employee that I have. I'm only as good as our worst employee, I should be saying. And it's getting harder and harder to prove people that can get certifications and do the job, willing to go to work in the middle of the night to plow snow, whatever. So if you're not going to support the merger, that's fine, but please treat everybody fairly moving forward. Because if it's cut, I'm afraid I won't be able to do a good job for this town.
I have one comment to that, Todd. I don't think it's us, the council, saying that.
And I heard that, Brad.
Okay.
I heard that.
Okay.
And I just wanted to make sure that you knew that what I felt it would do to me as a manager of a.
Sure. I understand that.
Because I did hear that from the crowd, a couple members of the crowd, and that is very concerning.
Yes, it's very concerning to me, and I don't think that's the direction that
And I'm not
council is
implying
going.
that we've ever been treated unfairly either. That's not the message I'm giving. Just we can't go from here to here in a day and expect to keep that.
And I totally 100% agree. And I know that we've got a lot of high-profile openings coming up where we're going to, the police, police chief is a prime example. If we don't have the resources in our arsenal to get the best candidate available, then we are not going to prosper as a city. I think, yes, there are some steps that need to happen to make sure that we are living within our means, but I don't think that means that we shut the city down because we're in debt. So I think our greatest asset is people. So that's, and I'm going to negotiate that way, and I'm going to operate that way and make sure that I can do what's best for not only our citizens here, but for the city workers that make our town the shining star that it is. So you've got my solemn vow on that for whatever that's worth. I know I'm certainly not in this position for financial gain. We're at like $3 an hour right now, but I just want you to know that.
Did you get a raise?
That action or no action upon this particular merger topic does not dictate how we feel about the city as a whole. That's more of a statement of the city not wanting to be involved in union politics.
All right. Anything else, Todd? Kurt? Dave?
Can I give you a hug afterwards?
If you want. Privately, though. I don't want to
Any comments from the council to my left?
Walking up to the school last night, driving around today, there's a lot of sidewalks that need to be scooped. Weather's been pretty good this week. I think we need to get all those scooped for the safety of students, for the safety of people walking their pets, all that.
All right, Pete.
I want to take a minute here. I realize we've been here a long time, but I think it's important enough. I've had enough people approach me, and I think I want to make this address. I had someone bring me an article that hit home, and I want to talk about it. I normally don't address negative energy in public, but after all the misinformation and fabrication that's been going on, I think I need to say something and give the public the truth. Just before the citizens of Sheldon were asked to vote on a franchise agreement to Mid-American Energy, there was a letter posted in the radio station's website and in the newspaper that cautioned the voters not to make the mistake that we did 29 years ago when we didn't vote for a municipal-owned utility. The problem with that statement is that it's false. We, in fact, did vote to form a utility. But when it got to the Utilities Board, they voted it down and said, no, you will not form a utility. You will use IPS. And the headline in the Sioux County Index states to that in April 25th of 1990, state bars Sheldon from creating its own utility. That article goes on and says, you will continue to use IPS as your utility because the costs associated with buying the infrastructure would be prohibitive and you would have to drastically raise rates, and so you will maintain the vendor that you have. Now, of course, if we're required to use that, and Mid-American Energy bought out IPS, so that still maintains that, that pretty much hamstrings us. There is no leverage. People talk about we should have leverage. I don't know what the leverage would be. We could quit using energy. I guess that would work. There was talk about right of eminent domain, and the franchise agreement does require that Mid-America get permission from the city to do projects, and the city already has the right of eminent domain, so it's somewhat of an issue, but not huge. The statement was made that it's apparent it would be easier to implement a fee after the franchise was granted. That's false, okay? It's just false. The process does not change. If the council would pass that, the same process would happen. By petition, someone could mandate a public vote. So that doesn't change. It's just a shame that the voters of the community had to make a decision based on false information. But it appeared too close to the voting to be corrected. So I think that's a shame, and I think it's kind of embarrassing for me. The other thing that's come up is the emergency services and how to fund them. That will continue to be a problem. It's not going to go away. As when we did the forum that the newspaper hosted that night, there was a special that NBC ran, and I didn't get a chance to watch it, but it was a special on the crisis in rural emergency services. It's going to continue to be a process. We just witnessed it with the city of Archer ending their ambulance service, and of course they all look to us for that. Hopefully we can get some guidance from the state or from somebody that's approached this problem somewhere else around in the Midwest, and hopefully we can do that, but we need to keep on that because today it's not a problem, but I promise you it will be in the next 10 years or so. So hopefully we can get some guidance and look for some alternative solutions. I wanted to point that out. Thank you.
All right. Councilman to my right. Comments? Good. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
So on item F3, there was no action taken. Is that intentional? There wasn't a motion or a second?
That was an oversight. I believe there was supposed to be a motion on F5, F2, correct?
There was a motion and second to approve the resolution.
And then there should be action taking on 5F3.
First reading of the ordinance?
There wasn't.
Then there should be. Thank you for catching that.
Good.
So moved.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Hint?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
Brewster?
Aye.
Farahona?
Aye.
Hamel?
Aye.
All right. And that is December 18.
Second reading.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. At this point, we are scheduled to go into closed session.
Need a motion for that?
Yes.
So moved.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Hint?
Aye.
Brewster?
Aye.
Farahona?
Aye.
Hamel?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
Okay, we are now out of closed session. At this point, we'd like to entertain a motion regarding the offer to purchase land.
I would
Go ahead.
move that we decline the bid.
Support.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Farahona?
Aye.
Hamel?
Aye.
Brewster?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
Hint?
Aye. And I make the motion to adjourn.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Hint?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
Brewster?
Aye.
Farahona?
Aye.
Hamel?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Ange.